Welcome everyone, I am Cody Koch. This video is part of our question and answer series. It's where people ask me questions and I answer it via video. Let's get to it. Cody, why do you prefer to buy larger businesses versus smaller businesses? Okay, so that's a good question. First, let's define what I consider smaller businesses. So a small or micro-sized business would be a business that makes less than $500,000 a year in earnings. You can calculate earnings by a phrase known as EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That's a common way to simplify cash flow analysis for businesses is using EBITDA. The main reason I like to acquire larger businesses versus smaller businesses is that larger businesses have a higher success rate for a variety of reasons. And so for starters, smaller businesses are typically just harder to manage. With smaller businesses, the owners are so heavily involved in the business management that it often becomes not only a full-time job, but a more than full-time job. Many owners of businesses end up working 50 to 60 hours per week to keep their businesses properly functioning. It's for these reasons that businesses that make less than $500,000 a year in earnings are typically more akin to buying a job versus buying an investment. Another issue with smaller businesses is that in most cases you cannot afford to have a decent sized staff. Well, the disadvantage with that is that with a larger staff you can have a wider diversity of skill sets to be able to tackle problems. With smaller businesses you usually have a much smaller staff, which means that when problems are presented, it's much more difficult to come up with solutions simply because you may not actually have the skill set you need within the company. An example of this would be a business that's in an industry that requires a lot of government regulations. And in those cases, that typically means you need a staff member or a lawyer who can keep track and stay within the compliance of those regulations at any given time. If your business is too small, it's simply unable to afford a full-time regulation compliance officer. Another issue is these businesses can't afford professional management. Professional management, of course, gives the owner some freedom and flexibility, where the owner doesn't have to be there all the time. The other side of it is professional management often has excellent skills at understanding business management, and by their very nature can dramatically improve a business significantly. Another less understood issue is that smaller businesses simply cannot take the same amount of risk. Because they're so small, they cannot afford a significant investment of assets, or they cannot try things that may have a dramatic effect on revenues in any negative way at all, simply because the company is not large enough to be able to afford those mistakes. Quite simply, I say this all the time on my channel, but they're simply too small to take on the risks that would be required for them to continue to grow. Another factor is that most small businesses have some sort of concentration issue. And what I mean by that is perhaps they have one major customer that represents maybe half of their revenue, or they have a supplier that represents almost all of their supplies or their inventory. Maybe they just have one physical location, which puts them at risk for road construction problems and so forth. Smaller businesses typically have a lot of concentration issues, which significantly increases their risks. A lot of this is actually borne out in the data as well. The banking industry has long been known, and bankers I know, and you can see research in the banking industry, that typically smaller businesses have a much higher chance of failure compared to larger businesses. And so you can see it in the data, quite literally. The default rate on business loans are a lot higher the smaller you go compared to the default rate on business loans the larger you go. And so it's for all these reasons that we prefer to buy larger businesses. Okay, everybody, that's it for me. If this video is helpful, please like and subscribe, and I thank you for watching.